Hey, what's up everybody? It is Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome to another edition of Track Walk in MX Simulator, where today we're playing a track called Penfold Park, which doesn't look too visually appealing. Maybe isn't the funnest track ever to play. Nope, it has one very, very unique feature about it, and that it is probably the slipperiest, the slickest track in MX Simulator history that is actually a track release. Some people have made tracks before that are, I mean, you know, I guess that they would be a track release too, but they do it on purpose where it's like meant to be just literally ice. This is just like the hardest track that you'll probably ever play, and it'll frustrate you to no end. But there's a rhyme and reason why I'm playing this track today for a track walk. And I'll get to that in a minute, but you guys know with track walks that usually it's tracks that I would recommend playing, that they're fun or adventurous for some reason or another. Lately we've been doing all the Sky Madness rounds, which again aren't the most visually appealing tracks, but they do have a interesting / fun aspect to it because it presents the challenge of doing platforming and stuff like that in a simulated motocross video game. What this does a really, really, really good job of is helping you with balance and throttle control way more than you would think. It's a very one-off thing. You're probably never going to encounter this type of slick mud surface on any other track that you play in this game. And oh man, every time you make it to the sand, it's like, finally, traction. But it gives you a really good idea of what the bike kind of does in some different conditions. It does like to kind of stand up on itself and get twisted around a lot. If you land hard, there's a pretty good chance that your bars will get, tweaked or turned in one direction or the other, and you have to try to save it. You can use the grass as your kind of saving grace because it does have a lot more traction. But I promise you, if you learn how to complete a whole lap on this track while staying on the mud part and landing all the jumps and making all the corners smoothly, you'll be a better rider for it. I can't say that is specifically the reason why the man who created this track had so much success, but the creator of this track was one Mikey Owen, and he has been kind of asking me for a while to do this as a track walk, or at least just play it, because this is one of his more classic tracks. He has a few other track releases as well, but I feel like this one is brought up a lot as kind of like MX Simulator folklore. I think this one was released in 2011, so it's definitely a bit of a throwback, and the reason it doesn't look as modern or visually appealing, I think, is because of that. I think if it was released today, he probably would have gone with some different decals and visuals overall. But like I said, the crux of it all is the traction and trying to adapt to playing on the traction. I can 100% promise you that me flailing around and looking like an idiot isn't because I'm a terrible player. Most of the time I will admit that, and I have done so quite a bit this year. But if you don't believe me that this track is really slippery and very hard to keep upright on, download it for yourself and try it out, because you will be sadly mistaken and quickly learn how hard it is to keep the bike going in one direction. I will say that I think riding a 450 on this type of track is maybe easier than riding another CC'd bike like a 252 stroke or even a 250F in this game, because the 450 possesses more torque, more bottom end, and thus kind of hooks up to the ground maybe a little bit easier than those bikes that kind of just go from zero to lighting up the rear tire very quickly. But 450s are what I'm accustomed to playing, so I just kind of carried it over and played it. I could have went with one of those other bikes, but just figured I'd continue the trend today. And honestly, I wanted to play this track without completely flailing around looking like an idiot. I will try to point out a couple things that you can maybe work on as well, that like as I go into a corner I'll point out. You want to mainly sit down a lot on this track. Leaning forward doesn't help as much as it does on other tracks per se, because if you lean too far forward, then the rear end starts sliding all the way around, so you do want to at least get a little bit more of that pressure on the rear end, and this is one of those tracks where sitting central on the bike is probably a little bit more helpful. Front end traction is not necessarily the key to this one. It's more about getting the bike kind of going in a cardinal direction and not having it swap on you like it did right there. What Mikey did on this track was kind of create a different environment with, you know, kind of like off cambers and tricky surfaces. Like most of the stuff is pretty standard. You have your inside outside options in these corners, pretty big berms. I mean, I think if it had a normal traction on it, it would really be probably one of the more boring tracks in the game. But this mud traction really gives it a whole different level, a whole different dimension that you really won't understand until you play it. So again, I mean, as with any track walk, I tell you guys to download it in the description. But yeah, go to the description, click on the link, download this track, and at least try to get one lap in. And after that, you can come back and tell me how much you hate this track or whatever. But I felt like that this was a track that needed to be played because, like I said, it's legendary in MX Simulator. This used to be like kind of a proving grounds track. Like when I was first starting to play the game and would get online with a bunch of my friends, this one would always end up in the reel eventually, and we'd all be floundering around on this track. And like I said, it was usually the guys that were the best at throttle control that tended to do really well on this track. And I remember playing this with Tyson, honestly, way back in 2012 when we all got on a server one time, and he was just flat tracking through the corners like it was nobody's business, just cruising, making it look way easier than it should. And yeah, I mean, I can't say that this specifically taught me how to, you know, use patience and, you know, get a little bit better understanding of the feel of the motorcycle underneath you in this game. But I would say it helped. I mean, you really do have to kind of think and kind of feel the bike more so on this track than you would on another track. A lot of the modern MX Sim tracks seem to have this kind of just like giant rut that you can throw it into and flow through no problem, and it's super easy to do. This track doesn't really offer that for you. You have to bite your time, cruise into corners, you know, easy on the throttle, out, straight up and down off of the jumps so that you don't get pitched. Like if I try to throw a whip, like it's pretty easy to throw a whip, but then you land and you get really sketchy. Of course, I'm gonna do it perfectly, almost perfectly on those two jumps after I say that, but because of the traction is so loose, this track is really great for on the bigger jumps throwing whips. But then if you try to bring it back and you're just slightly off kilter, it's gonna be a bad day. But yeah, like this was always a really fun track to just throw up on a server, play with your friends. It was you know, like a unique challenge, and it's outside of the box, which is what I've always liked about MX Simulator, is that there's not just the same standard tracks over and over again. There are a lot of you know, pretty prototypical fair racing type tracks, you know, local cross style tracks in this game, and it's nice to see people again think outside of the box, and they were doing it way back in 2011. I mean, there are a lot of tracks that are old like this that kind of go unnoticed because they're not as visually appealing, or maybe not you know, the funnest, biggest air type tracks that are out there anymore. But fortunately, Wallamped, who's the guy that actually produced the Sky Madness rounds, actually built a Pure MXS repository forum post recently. And Pure used to be like the, I guess if you know the sim community well enough, there's a website called tmfactory-racing.com that kind of has all of the modern and even, you know, a fair decent bit of the older tracks and bike models and bike skins and rider skins and stuff like that. Well, Pure was kind of the original one like that. It's kind of like, for Reflex players out there, it's like a Reflex Central, I guess, where it used to be where guys would go and post their tracks and they could get it rated. It was made, I'm gonna I forgot the guy's name. The Pure was created by a guy named Way something. Waypoint is wrong, Wayfair is wrong. Wayside at 21 maybe could be right, or Wayslides or something like that. But it was made by him. He released a lot of tracks on there. Checkers used to release a lot of his tracks on there. So a lot of these older tracks got released through there, and then Pure went down a couple of years ago, and a lot of us kind of OG sim players, not me included, because I'm kind of after all of this. I mean, Pure was still around when I started playing, but if you bought the game from 08 to 2011, Pure was like a really popular place to go. And a lot of guys post up their tracks on there and not on the forums, so a lot of these old tracks are kind of lost. But fortunately, Wallamped was very kind enough to kind of pull a lot of his tracks that he still had together from MediaFire links and stuff like that, make a forum post and get some of the other OG guys to get together and post on that forum post some of the older tracks that they still had as well. So now we have like a pretty good list of old tracks that are available to play again, and Penfold Park was one of them. I always told Mikey that if he ever sent me a download link to do this track that I would do it in a video, and lo and behold, found a download link for it, and bam, doing it for a track walk. So suck on that, Mikey, you and your Aussie self. Mikey is a great guy though. He was a 250 Supercross and Motocross champion back in 2012. He won basically everything there was to win on a 250F in this game back then. JLV split the world wide open, really, I guess, with the introduction of 450s into the game in late 2011. It used to be a 250F only game. He introduced 450s. The first year of 450 Supercross was 2012. It was won by Tyson, but the first year of 250 Regional Supercross was also 2012, and the West champion that year was Mikey. He went on to win the outdoor title. He won the Motocross of Nations that year with Australia. And yeah, he's a good friend of mine. He's been to my house, I guess just once, but I've seen him, I think, more than once. But yeah, he's stayed at my house before, visited with us, and he's a really cool guy, and he's a great photographer now for some local club soccer teams and stuff like that in Australia, and does some freelance photography for Getty Images, and all around good guy, like really cool guy. And it's always cool to go down memory lane and revisit some of these old sim memories, and Penfold Park was a fond one of mine, so I figured it was good to dig it up, play it, and do a little bit of an ode to Mikey here by sloshing around on maybe the slipperiest track in MX Simulator history. So yeah, this is another edition of Track Walk Penfold Park. Not the prettiest track, maybe not the most fun track, but it does have a unique element that I felt like you guys should see, and definitely would recommend downloading it and giving it a try for yourself. It is going to be in the description below, as I said, that link to download the track, and then I will probably also include a link to that repository for Pure MXS, so you guys can go back and check out some of the older tracks as well if you would like. But I thank you again for watching another video here on Start Your Systems. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you guys in the next one. So long for now.